What is going on, my fellow navigators, and welcome back to another video. Today's topic is all about, are we in a bubble when it comes to Pokemon cards? Now, this is a question that I get pretty often from people from the community or just people that I know who are getting back into Pokemon and have seen the recent surge over the last couple years in the value of Pokemon cards in general. So today I'm going to go over various aspects of, what a bubble is, exactly what a bubble relates to in economic cycles. I'm going to be going over, exactly my sentiments on why I think many are speculating that we are currently in a bubble. And then I'm going to also go over some facets that I think are really important to discuss when it relates to things like economic cycles, whether it be the stock market, the bond market, real estate, or yes, in this case, even Pokemon cards. And that'll include things like affordability. That'll include things like price relativity. So we'll go ahead and jump into all of that here today. This is going to be a really in-depth topic, but I'm going to try to conjugate it for you guys to make it really digestible, and ultimately you leave this conversation feeling a lot better about this question of, are we in a Pokemon cards bubble? But before we get started, guys, one quick announcement here. This Saturday, October 3rd at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, I am going to be hosting my first live stream Q&A. And for each of these live streams moving on into the future, I plan on having kind of an overall topic for the discussion. And for this week, the topic is Get to Know PokéNav. So I would like you guys to come ready with your questions. Anything that you would like to know about myself, whether that has to do with my investing journey, collecting, YouTube, or just anything else that you'd like to know about yours truly, come ready with those questions. And again, like I said, that will be at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I believe that's 12 p.m. Eastern Time. And then wherever the rest of you fall in between. So 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time this Saturday, October 3rd. Should be a lot of fun. Again, I don't like to take up too much of your time. The live stream should last for about an hour, but I do hope to see all of you there. Gives me an opportunity to answer a lot more questions, especially in real time. As many of you know, this was one of my big goals of the channel, and now that we are at 1,000 subscribers, well, far beyond that now, I do have the opportunity to start hosting these live streams, and I think it will be a lot of fun. And with that being said, guys, go ahead and do me a favor. Give me that double slap attack. One for that like button, one for that subscribe button. And if you want to be notified each and every time one of these videos drops, go ahead and thunder punch that notification bell so that you don't miss a single video. So without further ado, guys, let's go ahead and jump right into today's discussion. And I'd like to go ahead and start off by just explaining exactly what a bubble is when it comes to an economic cycle. So a bubble typically in any kind of market is basically a rapid escalation of market value, especially when it comes to the price of assets. So usually you see something like this when there's a lot of groupthink or herd behavior, basically when people are putting a lot of stake in a particular asset or asset class, and this sort of creates an artificial underbelly that drives up the price of these assets, but there's actually no foundation behind it. There's nothing that's really propping that up. So in essence, that's what you see with bubbles. We experience this in the stock market. Back in the early 2000s, you had the dot-com bubble where a lot of these companies that these tech companies or online companies that weren't even necessarily created yet, people were pumping a lot of money into these companies before they had actually had any kind of real value in the market. And in doing so, it created this overall bubble, which eventually just fell apart. We saw that in real estate too, back in 2007, 2008, 2009, where a lot of banks were giving out subprime mortgages and people were defaulting on their loans, and their therefore you had a crash in the real estate market. So those are just examples of what can happen when you create sort of this artificial bubble. So the first thing I want to do, let me go ahead and just back up here and explain that there's a big difference between the natural ebb and flow of markets and bubbles. And very often, especially back when I was a financial advisor, you saw this a lot with clients when they saw that there was, a pretty rapid increase in value for maybe a stock or some kind of asset. There was always a concern with them that there was this bubble and that there was going to be a crash, or if the stock market was doing very well, that there was going to be a crash. And this is where you have to be able to differentiate between a bubble and just natural ebbs and flows. And markets will do that. Markets will climb, they will come to a crest, and then they will come down. They will reach a trough, and then they will come back up. And so this is just a natural cycle of markets. There will be a natural ebb and flow, a natural increase, and a decline in that market. And no matter what you're dealing with, whether it's stocks, whether it's real estate, whether it's Pokemon cards, this is why I stress the importance of diversification when it comes to your assets. So I've talked about in previous videos why, for right now, not all of my eggs are in one basket, that those eggs being Pokemon cards and that basket being, Pokemon card investing. I've kind of split my investments among different areas so that if there is a downturn in one particular market, in this case Pokemon cards, I've got other areas that I can basically hedge against that downturn. And even if you are just strictly investing in Pokemon cards, it's also a good idea to diversify yourself in that manner as well. So if you're just strictly investing in graded cards, or if you're just strictly investing in sealed products, if there is a downturn in the market, chances are you're going to get hit harder if you're just investing in one kind of product. So that's why I say to go ahead and spread yourself out amongst different areas so that if there is that downturn, you can ride out that wave a little bit smoother. Or another example would be if you're just investing in modern or ultra modern products and you don't really have any vintage product as part of your overall portfolio. One thing that we're going to get to here later in the discussion is, the difference in modern and ultra modern versus vintage when you're talking about economic cycles. So that's a big point here. Probably the first thing that I want to drive home is you don't want to be stuck in a position to where if there is a downturn in the market, or if in fact there is a bubble that is brewing in Pokemon card investing and collecting, you don't want to be stuck in a position where you have to sell. You want to be in a position where if there is a downturn or if the market takes a severe hit, you want to be solidified in your financial position to where you don't feel that pressure to have to sell. You can go ahead and ride out that downturn and come back out on top. And I've stressed the importance of budgeting. I've got a whole video about budgeting and being able to create a budget to invest in Pokemon cards. And this is really important when you're talking about economic cycles as well, especially if we're looking at potential downturns. You want to make sure that your budget is on point, and you want to make sure that financially you are in a position to where if that situation does come, you don't feel that urge to have to sell. You want to be in a good financial position to where you can go ahead and ride that out, because those are the first people. Whenever you see a downturn, no matter what market it's in, those are the first people that you will see flee. The people that have spread themselves so thin that they have no choice but to sell their assets when the market comes down. And I see it time and time again. Like I said, no matter whether it's Pokemon, whether it's stocks, whether it's real estate, those are the people that will flee. And those are also the same people that build up that bubble in the first place. So don't find yourself in that position. And, I think that now with more knowledge coming about and with the Pokemon hobby kind of getting out of its innocence stage and getting more mature in its development, I think you're starting to see less and less of that. So I guess that really leads me to my next big point here. And that is, with all that being said, I don't believe that we are in an actual bubble. In fact, I actually see the Pokemon card market, whether it's for investors or collectors, I actually see it being very healthy at this point in time. I think that you're starting to see, especially with vintage products, you're starting to see a very solidified position for all cards. We really have well-established price points for most cards, especially when you're going back to the Wizards of the Coast era. We have very established price points for pretty much all cards, for all sets, whether that's graded cards, raw cards, or even sealed products. We have very established price points. And this will lead me into another topic that I'll discuss here at the end relating to price relativity, but we'll get to that here soon. But overall, for me, I think that the market is in a really good position overall. Now, with that being said, I do think that it's possible that we could see a market downturn. And as I said before, there's a big difference between a bubble and ultimately a crash and a downturn. And I think that the downturn, just kind of looking at things that are going on in the economy right now, throughout 2020, you've seen a very tremendous increase in not only people getting back into the hobby, but the value and the price of products, especially vintage products. And I think a lot of this is due to, one, with the pandemic, it brought a lot of people back into their homes and a lot more free time on their hands. So a lot more people were online. They were finding things that were bringing them joy, things from their childhood. And guess what? They came back across Pokemon. So this brought a lot of people back into the hobby. On top of that, even though a lot of people were out of work and the overall unemployment was very high, we're at a unique position in the economy in that the unemployment is still very high, but many people were still able to pay their bills thanks to these stimulus packages. So especially in the beginning, until I believe it was the end of July, a lot of people were receiving an extra $600 a month in stimulus payments. And for many people, this was more money than they were actually making at their day jobs. And so this actually brought in extra income on top of those stimulus checks that were sent out. So long story short, there was a lot of money pumped into the consumer economy, and that's what the government ultimately wanted. They wanted people to spend that money because ultimately that increases GDP by consumer spending. And a lot of people were spending that on Pokemon cards. And I think a lot of people were also transitioning and trying to find maybe side hustles or other areas that they could invest their money rather than just the stock market or bonds or whatever, which had taken a big hit, especially in the second quarter of this year. So I think that's where we found ourselves in 2020. But looking on into the future, all of this is going to come to an end eventually. A lot of the forbearance that you're seeing with homes and homeowners, a lot of the forbearance for renters who are basically putting their rent on hold with their landlords. A lot of people who have the hopes of going back to their jobs once the pandemic ends. These are not all guaranteed, and in fact, through my eyes, and I know I'm getting off topic of Pokemon cards here, guys, but I think this all relates to the overall question of, are we in a bubble, and is that bubble going to lead to a crash? So at the end of all of this money will eventually have to be paid back, a rent will start, they will have to start paying on their rent. Homeowners will have to start paying on their mortgage. And there's no guarantee that the people that are out of jobs now will have a job to go back to. So I can foresee a point where, again, a lot of the people who have entered this market that have essentially propped up some of the value, a lot of them are going to flee, and they're going to immediately sell at the first sign of trouble, when they either, one, don't have the same income that they're earning right now, maybe through unemployment, or maybe if they're furloughed, and when they find that they don't have a job to go back to, or that they have to pay back a big portion of their mortgage. So there's a lot of different factors going on here, and I think once the pandemic pans out, I think that there is definitely a possibility that we could see a downturn in the Pokemon card market. Now, that is just mere speculation. It's just something that I can foresee, because I've seen similar instances before when it comes to other markets. So I'm simply applying a lot of the knowledge that I have from other markets to characteristics that I'm finding similar in the Pokemon card market. So, overall, I don't think that we're in a bubble. I think that we potentially could see a downturn. Now, how much of a downturn, I can't really say. I don't think that it's going to be anything extremely significant, because there's always going to be people out there that are willing to pay the big price tag on those very rare and valuable items. But for the most part, guys, I mean, if you really look out there, most Pokemon cards are under $100. Even in their graded form, are under $100. When you start getting into things like, first edition base set or first edition base set Charizard, then yes, those are going to have an extremely hefty price tag on them. But for the most part, 90% of the investors or collectors out there aren't going to be able to afford that in the first place. I can't afford $100,000 first edition base set Charizard. So that is really left up to, top tier collectors and investors. But for the most part, most investors and collectors are going to be able to find products under $100. That's the vast majority of Pokemon cards. And so with that being said, this leads me to my next point here. Will really lead into a good transition. And this is really my sentiment of the overall state of mind in which many investors and collectors find themselves in this day and age. And one of the reasons why I think you see so much speculation and pontificating as to, we're in a Pokemon card bubble right now. I think the reason that you see most of this is that many of them are actually hoping that we are in a bubble. They're hoping that we will see a crash, because ultimately they want to see prices drop to maybe where they were pre-2016. And you may be asking yourself, well, why would somebody want that? Why would somebody want to see that happen? And to me, I mean, for the obvious reason, of course, is that they want to be able to purchase product at a cheaper price. But as I said, most Pokemon cards out there are actually under $100. So what is the other reason? And I think the other reason is this. I think that much of what you're seeing nowadays is due to somewhat of a keeping up with the Joneses effect. And if you guys have never heard that term before, it's basically just, you're wanting to live up to the lifestyle or the image of somebody else, maybe somebody else on a pedestal, so to speak. And I think a lot of this has come from the rise of social media and different platforms like this, where most, especially new people getting into the hobby, they see $20,000, $50,000, $100,000 booster boxes being opened or displayed on various social medias. And I'm not putting on blast anybody that does this. Everybody has their own way of collecting or investing. But the point that I'm trying to stress here is that there is, I believe, this pressure for many investors and collectors out there, especially those of you who are new, that somehow you're not a good enough investor or collector unless you're able to get into these high-end products. And I'll tell you right now, guys, most people are not. Most people are not able to get into these $20,000 booster boxes or beyond, or even these really expensive graded cards. And really, this is one reason why many people ask me, well, PokéNav, why don't we see your collection? Why don't we see your sealed collection or your graded cards and things like that? And I always retort with the response of, I don't think that it's healthy to really put these things out there. I know we've got a lot of people who frequent the channel who are brand new to the hobby, brand new to collecting and investing. And I feel like if I, put this out there and show these expensive products, which, to be honest, guys, it took a lot of time, a lot of effort, and it wasn't just Pokemon that allowed me to get these things. It was other areas. Like I said, I'm an investor in a lot of different areas. Pokemon has certainly helped in that, and my investing prowess over the last few years has certainly helped. But it's taken a lot of time and a lot of hard work in order to get that. But at the same time, I don't want to flaunt that, I guess you will. I don't want to flaunt that in front of everyone, because I feel like in some ways it's a little bit demeaning, and it's a little bit disappointing for many people out there to see those things, and they feel that pressure that maybe they're not good enough, or that they haven't achieved this status yet. So while I think that you see a lot of celebrities and other big name investors that show these things off, they're really cool, and it's awesome to see all of that. But realistically, guys, you have to, and I've said this before, you have to start where you can, wherever you can. Whether that's investing, like I said, I've made videos on being able to invest $200 or less a month. You have to really be able to start where you can. And so therefore, just to drive this all back home, I think what you're seeing when you hear talks of a bubble, a lot of that is merely from people who are wanting to see these prices go down, because they want to be able to get into these higher end products and somehow feel like they've achieved that sense of notoriety, I guess you could say. So instead, what I want to offer you here today is kind of the inverse of that. I want you to start looking at more affordable options and opportunities. So let's just go ahead and take, for instance, we'll talk about first edition base set. Now, as many of you probably seen here recently, a first edition base set booster box just went for almost $200,000, $198,000 to be exact. Now, I don't know about you, but I certainly can't afford that, and I'm sure that if I took a poll of not only everyone on this channel, but pretty much all other Pokemon related channels, I would say that 99% would not be able to afford that price tag. And that's why these products are now being sold at high-end auction houses. So what do you do instead? If you want to try to, whether you're a collector, whether you're an investor, and you want to, kind of tap into that particular market, where can you go from there? Well, let's start looking at more affordable opportunities that more align with your budget. So maybe if you can't afford first edition base set, maybe you start to look at shadowless. Maybe shadowless is more along the lines of what you can afford. If shadowless isn't an option, maybe you look more towards unlimited. Maybe start looking towards some of these unlimited cards. And even if they're not the rares or the non-holo rares, maybe you start looking at the commons and uncommons, because those definitely have value as well. And if unlimited isn't an option, What about Japanese? I've talked before, Japanese cards in base set, or really all sets in general, they're the exact same card, just in a different language. Same artwork, same design, everything, just in a different language. And they are typically about, a quarter of the cost of what an English or, North American version of that would be. So maybe you go along the lines of investing in Japanese base set. Or if you want to go even one step down from that, you want to get the nostalgia of base set, you want to get a good value for your investments. Talked about it a million times before, XY Evolutions. You've got a reprint, which is almost the exact copy of base set. Maybe you don't have that first edition stamp. Maybe the card is just slightly different, and it came out in 2016. But guess what, guys? It gives you the same type of nostalgia, the same, I shouldn't say the same, but a good value for your investment. So those are just options there. If you go and look at other areas, another really high-end product in Pokemon cards that we're all familiar with is trophy cards. So, for instance, Pikachu Illustrator card, $1 million. Again, that's going to be an even smaller percentage. So maybe it's 0.01% that could actually afford that particular card. So instead, I've talked about it in a previous video on undervalued cards. Maybe you start to look at the 2009 Battle Roads trophy cards instead. I mean, a lot of these cards, a little over $100 in their graded form. You're looking to potentially double your money when it comes back, or if it comes back, a PSA 10 or even a PSA 9. So that's the other thing that I want to stress here today, guys, is there's a lot of opportunities out there, and don't ever feel like you have to be pressured into, spending beyond your means or allocating funds to an investment that you simply just can't afford. There's a lot of other ways that you can go about being an investor or a collector, and you can have a great time with it, and you don't have to stretch yourself too thin, and you won't fall into this mindset that that we're in a bubble and that we're headed for a crash, because I think that's where a lot of this has been leading to. So the last point here, guys, I know this is a longer video. The last point that I'm going to go over here really quickly is the importance of price relativity. So this really will be a nice summation of our entire discussion here today. Price relativity is basically the price of a product relative to its contents inside. So let's go ahead and take, for instance, again, first edition base set. It's well established from top to bottom, all the way from first edition Charizard all the way down to first edition Gust of Wind. Those price points are very established. And even though that booster box is now going for $200,000, it's still actually a very good investment for those who can afford it, because if you look at it, I mean, PSA 10 first edition Charizard, well over $100,000. Blastoise, PSA 10, PSA 9, going for $25,000 to $30,000. Venusaur going for $10,000, $15,000. Even down into the commons and uncommons, several $1,000s. So when you start to add up all of the value that's potentially in this booster box, it is actually the price of the booster box relative to the contents inside is actually a good buy and a good investment, even though the value just continues to climb. Now, this isn't the same for everything. And in fact, going back to, if we do have a downturn, one of the first things that I foresee getting hit the hardest will be modern and ultra modern sets, because to be honest with you guys, much of those products are actually propped up by vintage. So if vintage is going to take a hit, modern and ultra modern are going to take a very big hit. It'd be similar to if you were, if in your stock portfolio you had growth stocks and you had blue chip stocks. Well, even though those blue chip stocks may take a slight hit, they're still very well established, so they're not going to take near as much of a hit as you would with those growth stocks, which, you know, they would be sort of comparable to like first edition base set and modern and ultra modern. Those growth stocks, those modern, ultra modern, they're going to take a big hit in a downturn. And so these are all things to just keep in mind as well, guys. This is one reason, you know, why I also really like evolutions. If you look at the price points of the cards in the set compared to the actual price of the booster box, booster boxes are still going for about $130 to $150. You've got several cards in that set that are going for well over $100. Everything from all of the Charizards, Surfing Pikachu, Flying Pikachu, you know, even like the Mega Mega Venusaurs, Mega Blastoise, Dragonite, they're all right around that $100 range. So that's why, you know, I've always said XY, I think Evolutions is a good investment because that price relativity is actually, it's a really good deal. And you don't see that among all products in general, but certainly among modern and ultra modern. So just one more point to keep in mind here when we're talking about you know, bubbles and investing in products that are really going to be around for the long term. So that is going to do it for today's discussion, guys. Again, whether or not we are in a Pokemon card bubble or not, the most important thing to take away from today's discussion is that you should always be in a financially stable place. And I do think that diversification is also very important, whether that is strictly with Pokemon cards or whether that is among other asset classes as well. I think that having yourself in a good financial position is ultimately the number one thing that you should focus on, no matter what the market is doing, no matter where prices are at. And then the other thing is always keep in mind that there are a lot of opportunities out there, affordable opportunities for every investor, for every collector. You just simply have to look for them, do the research, watch videos of others that have been in the hobby for a while. I never claim that I know what the market's going to do or that I am the ultimate end all for your search of knowledge or anything like that. I am simply just one resource. So as I said before, always find multiple resources out there that you can pull from. And last but not least, make sure that you are always looking for price relativity when you're looking at products, especially when you're looking at things like booster boxes. Look at what the value of the contents inside are relative to the actual product itself. That will save you a lot of time and a lot of headaches. So thank you all for being here today. Thank you for coming back each and every week. I appreciate your support so much. And I can't wait to talk to all of you guys this Saturday, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time in that live stream. Looking forward to it tremendously, guys. Other than that, I will see you all next time. My name is PokéNav. I'm here to help you navigate the world of Pokemon one video at a time, and I will see you all in the next video.